So first up, for each of these, you'll utilize the Configure tab in the Home menu of PowerCore and the C3 tuning application. First up, right at the top, Autotune. It's a very popular device, very popular accessory for people to employ full-time closed loop on their bikes to be able to set a target AFR and then have that bike now target, say, 13.2 at all times or wherever you would like, and then auto-tune the trims as you ride. So here, we would enable it, and maybe we want to do a engine runtime of maybe 10 seconds. We never want the auto-tune process to start before 10 seconds of runtime has elapsed. Or maybe we would utilize engine temperature where, I have to have engine temperature tapped, so I'm either piping that into the analog or it's an automatic sensor that Dynojet has tapped, and require engine temp. Don't auto-tune prior to 100 degrees of engine temperature. Then you'd click OK. You can also set your max enrichment and enleanment down here at the bottom. Accel pump. This would be for those vehicles which maybe they stumble when you stab the throttle. So you would, if you needed this, you would enable it. The number of revolutions of the crankshaft that you want the event to be active for, like be just 10 revolutions of the crank. And then your adjustment, this can be positive or negative. So maybe your vehicle goes rich on throttle stab and you need to pull fuel, or if it goes lean, you can add fuel. And then the throttle delta required here, smaller numbers will activate the Accel pump quicker or more easily or more with less throttle blip. A larger number will require a lot of throttle stab to engage the event. Next up, startup fuel. So anytime a bike might struggle to get going when you first start it, Dynojet offers within our Power Commander 6 applications, we of course would enable this. And then we have two options here for the mode that the startup fuel would be active for. So we can do this based on a runtime. So it could just be, so start it up and for 10 seconds, I want you to add 5 points of fuel. That might help your bike. Or we can do this based on engine temperature. This is actually a really cool feature where maybe you only need to add fuel when the engine temp is cold. It's not every time I start the engine for that 5 or 10 seconds, but only when it's cold. And then also for those individuals who might actually be running our PTI units, we can have this engine temperature be based on intake air temperature so that you would add fuel based on that intake air temperature and then subtract fuel as your charge got warm, or vice versa, depending on your application. So you can set the number of cells that you need for the fuel adjustment and which temperature it would transition at. So maybe by 100 degrees, we don't need any fuel adjustment, but down in that zero engine temperature range, we do need to add 10 points of fuel. And then this would transition and persist as it interpolates in between those temperatures. So very cool features there. Next up, rev extend. So all these power commanders, if you do have fuel and ignition control, if you enable this, you will begin being allowed to rev higher than your factory ECU's stock rev limit. In this case, we're going to rev extend out to 14,000. You can contact our tech support for anything. Maybe you need longer. You want to go to 14.2. You would load that key in here from our tech support guys, and it would give you a new rev limit. Next, engine temperature. So we can either enable this on Harley ECM data, where that's our J1850 actual data that we are piping in through the harness, or it can be an analog voltage. Here's where you would set up that analog transition voltage of the engine temperature that you have tapped. So you will need to know your transfer function of the analog signal that you're tapping into. So you would enter all of your voltages and their temperature correlations on this table. Next, similar to engine temperature, we have pressure. So we're configuring each of those analog wires that we're bringing in on that analog wire. So if we want, we can enable it and then click here maybe at a quarter of a volt and then up to 4.75 volts. We range from a value of 10 psia on say an absolute pressure sensor up to 44.5. So that's like a 3-bar map sensor, some pretty common transfer function voltages there. And then our pressure sensor is now calibrated on that analog terminal strip, ADC1, for the translation on that pressure sensor. All right, infield fuel adjustments. This is that benefit of that Pod 300 that we talked about, where you can actually break out your graduation ranges of your mid and high RPM. So, but anything below, in this case, 3,500 RPM would be our infield fuel adjustment, adding or subtracting fuel below 3,500. Mid is in between each of these. So from 35 to 7,000 are that mid up or down fuel adjustment with the pod would be active. And then above that, high RPM over 7,000, we are adding fuel over 7,000 with this current setup. And then your trims would be populated down here if it has been saved to the device using the pod. If we've added 5% of fuel on the top end in the high range, you would see that here after you've received your solution. Power Commander Network. So this is useful, especially in Power Commander 5 land, when we had other devices to add, such as searching for an ignition module or an SFM. They would be populated here. In this case, this device doesn't have any extra modules connected to it, and Power Commander 6s are not allowed to have any other devices communicate with it, such as that SFM or ignition module 5. All right, launch control. Super cool for those guys on the drag strip to be able to sit there and stutter on the button to be able to launch at full power. You can set up your RPM here at that which you wish to launch, enable it or disable it, whatever type of switch you're running, if you're on switch input 1 or 2. And then you can either use a timer amount, so you would have to hold the button for 5 seconds or not. And then lastly, similar to launch control for that pit lane style speed limiter, tell a switch or tell your Power Commander 6 which input you're on, 1 or 2, what type of switch you're using. Again, enable it, and the source would be, in this case, speed, and then whatever speed limit you want to be.